throw that aside, I am going to start with one project we've been working on for 3 years I thought you'd be interested in, okay? And this one has to do with source. It's just an interesting project that we've been working on, and I think you'll find fascinating. Okay. I do. It has been about 3 years, and hopefully it's going to be wrapped up at March 13th. Now, needless to say, everything in our orgs flows from LRH. So we had this project that we wanted to do to have a presence of LRH. Now, we have the LRH exhibits in the orgs that are going in. We have lifetime exhibitions at the Flag Land Base. We're going to have an event hall, which is going to have massive quantities of artifacts and all manner of things on his life. But nevertheless, we wanted to do something for the permanency and future of Scientology in terms of historical events. Now, you see this around the world, major historical figures, they leave monuments to them. Well, we actually do have our own. And there are certain places on this planet that stand as signposts on LRH's research trail. So when you go through those places, you're effectively walking through time and in his footsteps. Good example, anybody who's been at St. Hill, you go through St. Hill Manor, there it is. That's St. Hill, he's ED, and you know about the clearing course, the beginning OT levels, the briefing course, it gives you a reality. Well, we want to do that with every effective signpost along the research trail from 1950 forward. So, to give you an example now, we initiated a project, and it's actually being done through the Church of Spiritual Technology. And so I know it's something you don't hear that much about because they're not really a frontline Scientology church, but they are the church who LRH basically bequested his entire estate. And that's where all of the preservation of the technology takes place and so forth. They have been in a project for about 3 years now on this subject to find these places. And this, I'm talking about literally locations he was, houses he was, offices he was, tracking them down and getting these places and bringing them back to everything that was there when he was there so that Scientologists can travel the globe, stop by and see. So really the pit stops of the research trail to full OT. So I'm going to give you an example of some of these, okay? They include the cabin where he wrote Excalibur, which I think some of you may have heard about. They include Phoenix, Arizona, where he did all of his exteriorization research and ultimately announced Scientology. They include in Washington, D.C., his original office there. They include the office in Fitzroy Street in London. They include Johannesburg, where he worked and created all of the Div 6 services. And they include, of course, his house where he did the levels up through OT. Now let me show them to you, okay? Okay, beginning, Port Orchard Cabin, okay? Now, this is where LRH lived on the western shore of Puget Sound in Port Orchard, Washington in 1930s, and he actually built this cabin in 1937. And when we tracked it down, it had seen 50 years of neglect. Its roof was caved in, the wood was rotting with heavy water damage from years of rain. Despite the damage, many of the original items of furniture were there ready for salvage, believe it or not. So the cabin today, here it is, 1 year later, brought back to its original condition, both inside and outside. Now, painstaking care was taken to restore the cabin to exactly how LRH had built it. LRH wrote notes describing the cabin in detail, and these were used as a map for the restoration. We even interviewed family members who gave us details to bring it back to exactly how LRH had it. For instance, the naughty red cedar throughout is the original wood fully reconditioned. The bed, even on the LRH's bed, he described it as 9 feet long, 4 feet off the deck, columned, a little house in itself, and there it is, and you can see it. Stoves, all furnishings restored, matched to the originals. The bookcases reconstructed through meticulous detail to match exactly their original construction, and, by the way, the books that were there when he was writing. LRH used it as a writing studio. His artifacts of the time were returned, such as the typewriter, material he published during those prolific years of pulp fiction, notes from his books on Excalibur, which were written in this very cabin. They will be located there, and all of it included exactly as it was in 1940 when LRH left Puget Sound on the 1940 Alaska expedition, which you just heard about. So there you have it, the fully restored Port Orchard cabin. And there you go. And that will probably be at the Flag Land Base and located there as part of the entire event hall that will be taking place. Now we move to Phoenix, Arizona, okay? And LRH lived in Phoenix from 1952 through 1954, and his Camelback house was named for the mountain that stands behind it, which you can see there, and it was shaped like the hump of a camel. And while it was his home, it was also a busy site with Scientologists coming to ask questions, just talk to LRH. Here you have where LRH gave his lectures, formed the Hubbard Association of Scientologists International. And in this shot coming up, you can see LRH actually delivering what you know as the Route to Infinity Technique 80 lectures. For those of you who have heard them, you'll have noted the little sound in the background. That's the gravel he's standing on when he's walking there. Okay, this is also where a bust was made by a student, actually, and only 3 remain, and this one here you can see was fully restored, and it's one of the only 3 in existence. Then there's the piano you saw in that one shot that is well known, and that piano was found. It's made by a manufacturer that's been out of business for 40 years, but we found it, and through craftsmanship restored it to its original condition. And this is also where LRH wrote The Creation of Human Ability in Phoenix. Here too is where he used the Matheson meter to research the whole track, and you see the results in the history of man. He designed the Scientology cross in Phoenix, Arizona. That's another example of what occurred in that area. And today you can see the house, which has been restored to its original condition when LRH lived there. And here you can see the interior restoration in progress. And we've located many of the originals, such as the stove even, the exact measurements of the kitchen cabinets. And you can see here in these renderings what it will look like when it is completed. So it was restored to exactly like it was when LRH was there with the displays around it. There's an information center that will be at the beginning containing stories and artifacts from LRH's development of Scientology in Phoenix. The rooms in the living room you can see will be restored to originals, such as where LRH's office was. So it'll be exactly how it was when LRH was there. So that's Camelback House in Phoenix, Arizona. Of course, you saw him sitting there on a chaise lounge outside in the front. That's, of course, the story that comes from be 3 feet back of your head. And there you go. That's what's happening there. Okay, moving on to Founding Church in Washington, D.C. And this 1810 and 1812 19th Street in Washington, D.C. And that was the home of the Founding Church, and incidentally, just a few minutes walk from the current org location. Now, at this place, LRH became executive director in 1955 and worked at FCDC through 1959 when he moved to St. Hill. He formed HCO there, developed a 6-department org board, delivered the first Scientology wedding ceremony, developed TRs, upper induct TRs 7 and 8 were issued, and the first check sheet. Now, this is the building today, you can see in this next shot, and it too will be restored fully, room by room, as they were at the time. Here is reception, and that is exactly what the reception looked like at the time, not counting the displays that are there. And this is LRH's office, and it will be restored exactly to his specifications as he described the office in detail, laying out exactly how he wanted it to facilitate his production, and we have the photographs. And the original HCO will be there just as it was. The technical training room will be set up exactly as it was when he was there, including the exact reel-to-reel tape machines used to reproduce the lectures for the students, and also the chapel that LRH gave the Academy Lecture Series, also known to you today as the Conquest of Chaos. So there you have the original FCDC. And that location will serve as a primary location for bringing local opinion leaders, people from Congress, people in government there to be at the site where LRH was, and then we send them 3 feet back of their head. Moving on to London. Here's LRH in London, England, and this is the org at 35 and 37 Fitzroy Street. LRH actually commuted between FCDC and Fitzroy between 1955 and 1959. And here's where he wrote the very first HCO bulletin on 22 July 1956. And among the technical advances at that location were TRs 1 through 4. It's also right here, LRH delivering the 5th London ACC, which he used the case histories in the book, Have You Lived Before This Life? He also wrote the fundamentals of thought there. And here you can see the Fitzroy Street building today. And its restorations will also include reception with information on the building and LRH's work here. And it will also have LRH's office fully restored in all aspects. The organizing chart, it was as called then, exactly where it was hung at the time, and staff offices such as these. So there you have the Fitzroy Street building, the original London org. Now, moving to the southern hemisphere, there is Johannesburg, and you've now heard a lot about Johannesburg org. Well, LRH lived in Johannesburg for about a year while holding the hat of ED of Johannesburg org. And these are the shots LRH took showing his house from the time period. Some of you might recall this from the source briefing giving it March 13th, 2 years ago. And among the many breakthroughs made by LRH in Johannesburg included the personnel efficiency course, the entire testing line. He developed the anatomy of the human mind course. And it's here he posed for Cohort Steinberg, who made the bust you see displayed in all orgs today. Well, since then, the house has been under extensive restoration for several months. And later owners had done a real number, and we're bringing it back to exactly how it was. For instance, they filled in the entire pool. So we had it excavated, and it's completely restored it down to the last detail, including the fountain and the original tiles. On the interior renovations, many of the details of the house had been plastered over, so we've had a lot of intensive work going on to carefully uncover the wood trim, hand-placed stone walls, and more. It's all revealed and restored as it was when he was there. LRH's butler, Johans, who again you might have seen in the March 13th event, he came in and he's helping giving descriptions and particulars so we can make sure it was totally accurate to the last detail. And you can see the house that's now been restored, ready for final furnishing. And here is the pool, fully restored, and the waterfall. That's it done. And there's the fully restored exterior of the house today. That too is a done. And as for what it will look like when you enter, you're going to see an entire information center with displays showing LRH's work in Johannesburg. Each room will be restored to original. His office where he drew the African Bill of Rights, and so much more history in the development of Scientology in Africa and for the world. So that's his house in Johannesburg. Your assignment, of course, is to tour through all of these before the March 13th event. So that's one part of your assignment. Just keep a note of it. Yeah, right, there you go. Craig's got it down. And finally, the last one I wanted to show you, although not the last of all of them, is in Creston, California. And of course, that is where LRH did all of his upper level research. Wrote up OT8 that you have today, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and you've sometimes seen some of these shots in earlier years. I don't think we've shown it in many years. So here you can see it. It's his home near San Luis Obispo in California. And it was actually a horse ranch. And LRH had many paint horses on that ranch, and he lived there for about 3 years. And it's, as I just said, it's where he completed New OT8 and all beyond that. It's also where he recorded Ron's Journal 38 and Ron's Journal 39. And it is a ranch house, and it has been maintained since by personal staff at the Church of Spiritual Technology. And of course, LRH designed the entire property, specifying the motif, actually going around, seeing to the construction of fences and you name it. This is not just a matter of pulling out notes. That's his property. Here you can see the organ where LRH used to write the music for Road to Freedom album. It's there where he recorded Thank You for Listening that you hear in that album. Bedroom with auditing table right at the end of the bed, first session of the day. Incidentally, at least 6 sessions a day, every single day. And in the garage are even the cars that he used to drive around the property for daily photo shoots. There you go. Or into town, they're both there on the site. And here you can see just some of the 160 acres, and again, LRH personally was there right down to the picket fences and how they were lined up on the hills. So there you can see it, and that will soon be open for tours, and that is where LRH did his final research. There you go.